you not only run these races, but you do it with things in your shoes, other things that make it more uncomfortable. Why? Tell me why you do that.
I threw thumbtacks in my shoes, went on a 6-mile run, and it panned out, worked. I do thumbtacks, I do Legos, I just do anything to pretty much callus the bottom of my feet, because obviously, as you know, throughout these 100-mile, 200-mile races, your feet can get blistered up. And as long as my feet are calloused up, I'm not going to get any blisters. So it plays into that as well. Pain when it comes to, sometimes it goes into my feet. My feet are bleeding. It sucks, And if I can endure that pain for as long as I can, when it comes race time, it's not going to be difficult. So it definitely helps with that pain aspect.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Ryan Snaadt. It Rhymes with Odd, and you're watching and listening to the Rhymes with Odd podcast. Today we have a really special guest. It is Faruk Garibovic.
Spot on.
Dang it. Okay. I was like, I struggled with that one. Faruk is a ultra marathon runner, and does some really insane stuff with kind of mental toughness, mindset, and really wanted to have you on today to kind of talk about some of the things and the insane feats of athleticism you've been attempting and crazy mindset stuff. So really excited to have you on, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the average Joe that doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and where you're from.
From Des Moines. Just I do carpet cleaning for a living. I love acting. That was my sort of thing. But then as I graduated high school, I got into the whole running side of things. And then I found out about ultra running, and so I wanted to continue pursuing that. Did 100-mile races on my own without doing it officially, and then eventually registered for races and continue to pump those out and continue the grind when it comes to that. So
love it, man. So tell us a little bit. What's kind of your track record for the number of races you've done? How long they typically are? Like, what's kind of your running resume for people to kind of understand like the amount of stuff you've done?
So I've done multiple 100-mile races on my own, but I have 2 official races under my belt, one 100K and then another 240-mile race that I did out in Utah. So that was the one I did last year. So definitely tough. So
sure, because what was the full length on that, the distance?
240 miles. So
do you just do like these super long races? You obviously can't run for 200 miles without stopping ever, or do you do that? Is it just a nonstop?
Yeah, there are definitely athletes that don't stop doing it. That's the goal when it comes to it, stop as least as possible. But when it comes to these races, you have like 8 stations, right? So every like 15, 20, up to 25 and 30 miles, you don't have an aid station to access crew with, right? So you're up to that length of distance without anybody, and you're just running that full length of time. And the only time you ever stop is to eat, use the bathroom, that sort of thing. But, it's pretty hectic going out there and just solo dolo, especially since I don't even have any pacers that I run with. So it's all solo and it's tough mentally.
Sure. So walk me through a little bit of your first race you ever did. Like, did you just try to train on your own and go? Did you get a coach? Like, what was that process like to kind of get into your first long distance race?
So my first long distance race was 41 miles, and I posted a picture on my Instagram saying however many likes this gets will be the amount of miles that I'll do. And so it was 41. So I ended up doing that 41 miles. It was very, very tough. And then I started to set goals for myself. Then I wanted to do the 100 miles within 24 hours. I did that later. It was like 3 months later. And then I had another 100-miler that I did on Memorial Day and just kept on pushing to it and just try to be more consistent. But I didn't train for those at all. I just basically just went out on a whim for it, which is stupid, but, I did it. So as I continued to progress and I trained for these events, then I started to get better when it came to like just lasting longer and actually completing them without any like pain or whatnot. So
sure. No, that's great. So just take us back a little bit to like when you first started running. Were you in like cross country in high school? Like, how did you first get your introduction to running in general?
So I actually didn't do any running throughout middle school and high school. A lot of people assume that because running 100 miles at 21, no one does that. So I just started running after high school. And
did you do any sports in high school? Or
I did soccer junior year. That's it.
Well, did you do like, where'd you go to high school?
Roosevelt.
Okay, so did you just like specialize in theater because you mentioned you're into acting and you went to college for that? Is that kind of the
Absolutely, okay. Yeah. Just specialize in theater.
And I'm from like small town Iowa where I did 3 sports. I was on 4 or 5 clubs. Like when I go, because I've shot videos for public schools and it's like most kids just do one thing or they don't even do anything at the school because there's so many people and it's so competitive that if you're not exceptional at something, it's not even worth the time. So that's a new thing for me. I'm always like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. So
Yeah, just pretty much just continue doing the theater thing. I did run a little bit just to like lose weight because I was a little bit chunky throughout high school, but then I started seriously running after high school. So
sure. So you didn't run at all competitively in high school. You went to DMAC for school, right? For college, so Des Moines Area Community College. Walk me through the process, because tell me what'd you go to school for and what'd you study?
I got graduated in acting, so that was my thing that I went for.
Okay, and then you told me off camera earlier you were in a movie recently. So tell me through that process of like going to community college for acting, and now you're going to be in a movie. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my professor that I had, Carl Lindbergh, shout out to him. He definitely motivated me to just keep on pushing, persevering through the acting side of things, because it gets tough. It's the business, you know. So I just kept on putting out auditions, recording them, self-taping them, and I eventually got a point where they wanted to get a further audition with me. So I sent out another one, and then it worked. So we scheduled it out. It was in Thanksgiving break of last year, and then I went down to Atlanta, filmed it for, what was it, like a week and a half or so, and it was pretty gnarly. three or four scenes.
Because it's a Mark Wahlberg movie, right?
Correct.
It's like a A-list movie. It's not just like a little mini doc or something like that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was, and I got to see everything behind the snes, and it was amazing. Honestly,
Can you divulge what the movie's about, or the subject matter, the plot, or are you like sworn to secrecy?
No. It's basically the Mark. He's an assassin, and he's basically on the run from people, and he's taking his family through adventures, and it's basically like that sort of thing.
That's awesome. So do you have like a top 5 spot in that role? Or are you an extra? Like, what's kind of your involvement in it?
I have one line.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very, very minimal.
Sure. Well, that's great. I mean, for kind of your first big movie, I know I have a bunch of friends in the acting world, because I used to work for a studio in Urbandale, and one of our workers was like, she saved up for, I think she had like 12 months worth of savings and just moved to LA and was like hoping to make it. And she's still out there working. She's been in a couple bigger productions. I think she also comes back to Iowa too. But it's a tough business, because have you ever thought about like moving out to LA, or are you trying to get like regional gigs that'll get you to that point? What's kind of your vision for the acting side of stuff?
My goal is to complete what I got going on with running right now, and then I want to move to Atlanta. That's the goal, because it's more so like television, and that's my style of work that I would like to do. But LA, that's very, very tough to get into straight off the rip as a 21-year-old. It's a little less economic on the economic side when it comes to Atlanta. Obviously, it's still really expensive compared to us right now, but I think it'll be more of a smart move to go to Atlanta. So
well, in LA is it's so expensive. Like
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine that I interned with in college, and her previous year she'd interned with Hurley in like LA, and I think her apartment was like 5 miles away, but she couldn't drive because it was so crowded. So she had to walk in heels like 5 miles every day. And then like she wised up and got some, like sneakers on. I'm like, duh, like I could have told you that right away. But you would have probably done it with thumbtacks in your shoes. So
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. So kind of going back to the running side. I mean, you talk a lot on social media about like what's your username on Instagram? It's
Thumbtack Runner.
The Thumbtack Runner. So you not only run these races, but you do it with things in your shoes, other things that make it more uncomfortable. Why? Tell me why you do that.
Well, I started off as a joke. I said, hey, let me just throw some thumbtacks in my shoes. And then it actually became a possibility. I said, what if I can actually do it? It sounds ridiculous. A lot of people may think it's absurd, but why not try? So I gave it an effort. It was a couple of years ago. I did a run during trick-or-treat time, right? And so I threw thumbtacks in my shoes, went on a 6-mile run, and it panned out, worked. I do thumbtacks, I do Legos, I just do anything to pretty much callus the bottom of my feet, because obviously, as you know, throughout these 100-mile, 200-mile races, your feet can get blistered up. And as long as my feet are calloused up, I'm not going to get any blisters. So it plays into that as well. And then also as well, there's pain when it comes to, sometimes it goes into my feet. My feet are bleeding. It sucks, you know? And if I can endure that pain for as long as I can, when it comes race time, it's not going to be difficult. So it definitely helps with that pain aspect.
So do you have the thumbtacks in your shoes when you run the ultras, or is it like it's a training thing to callus your feet?
In October, I will have the thumbtacks in my shoes for the last 20 miles.
Oh my
do.
God,
Yeah.
That's wild, man. Was it like a dare? Like, how did it first come about? Was it just a joke and then it became real, or?
Yeah, it was a joke. I told it was me. Everything that I come up with is all by myself. Sometimes I ask people, hey, what should I do next? But the whole thumbtack idea was, hey, let's just throw thumbtacks in my shoes and see what happens, So
Sure. Well, hopefully they're not like the sharp side up they're all sideways, right? Or do you like stick them in your shoe and have them all pointed up like those monks that walk on coals and stuff? Like, do you point the sharp part up, or is it just kind of rolled around in there?
I take off my shoe. I just dump as many as I can, and however my foot goes in there is how it will be. So sometimes it goes right off the rip, and I just have to suck it up. So.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of times, especially since I go uphill and downhill, that's where it gets tricky, because there's that little friction of the thumbtack going in my foot, and causes that little disturbance within my feet.
Sure. What's been in that training style? There has to have been like some sort of injury, minor. I mean, obviously discomfort is a huge thing, but has there been any time where you've been like running and it's like dug completely in your foot and you have to stop because you're like bleeding or losing feeling in your foot or anything like that?
It definitely gets to a point where it gets numb, but I get used to it. So thankfully there hasn't been a time where, nothing severe has happened, but I mean, I've definitely bled out profusely.
Sure.
Hurt really bad, but just suck it up, like I said. Yeah.
Sure. What are people's first reactions when they hear that?
99% of the time it's, hey, the thumbtacks are fake. You don't actually put it in your shoes, that sort of thing. But then when I actually have people put the thumbtacks in there and then I go run with them and they see it, then they're like, oh, okay, I have no reason to complain.
Sure. Well, Faruk's do you think he's a psycho? What's the deal?
I mean, that's just what makes him him. So
Okay.
It makes him a unique ultra runner. So
Sure. She said it makes him unique and makes him him, which I did not. I mean, if my wife was like, listen, she's like, what are you running? Like, take the damn things out. One, why are you running an ultra marathon? Two, why are you doing it with thumbtacks in your shoes? That's pretty wild. So,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting though, because there, especially in the last couple of years, like we see all these people coming out, like David Goggins and these other folks that kind of preach about, pushing your boundaries and putting the mental aspect of it in there. I think from your perspective too, how does some of that stuff relate to other parts of your life? Because if you can willingly subject yourself to that kind of pain just to see what your mind can do and what your body can do, how has that affected other parts of your life?
Yeah, I'll say it like this. So running is just the easiest part of my life. Obviously, it's very difficult at times, but if I can make it more difficult, it'll obviously translate to other aspects of my life, whether it's work, whether I'm working 16, 18 hours a day. If I've ran with thumbtacks in my shoes, I can endure that pain, And like I said, I do carpet cleaning, and sometimes we clean hotels 30 stories up, and I got to go flights up and down, up and down, up and down all day. And all you got to do is just suck it up. And the more and more and more you have that like resume, like you mentioned before, of just pain and suffering, when it comes to that, the easier it will be when time comes, So
Sure. Is there like an ultimate goal or a thing you're doing this for? Like a huge race coming up, or like down the road, I'd like to be able to physically do this? Or is there some kind of end goal, or is it just a lifestyle for you and kind of subjecting yourself to these micro pains to kind of callous your mind and your feet, as you mentioned it earlier?
It's a bit of both. I want to do this as a lifestyle. I don't want to ever just train for a race, because if I'm just training for a race, then when there is no race, then I'm just not going to be who I am. So as long as I have that consistency within my life of just doing it every day, then I can do it within races. Now, when it comes to my ultra running, I definitely want to be the world's greatest runner when it comes to that. I am very, very young within the sport. Majority of people are like 30s, 40s, and up to 50s as well. And I believe I have the capability to do that. So I really just want to start out early and just see what I'm all about.
Sure. When I follow a couple people online, I'm trying to think of some of the names. There's a guy that I want to say he's like the number one runner on Strava. Like, I can't remember what his name is, Nick something, but he's, like you said, like late 40s, early 50s. And every week he runs 100 miles, whether it's just to keep up with the training or he's doing a 100-mile race out in the middle of nowhere. I think he just posted one where he's in like France and just running along, and he's like mile 10, mile 50, mile 75, and the breathing never changes. I'd be like, mile 75, like I'm dying here. Like the fact he can keep moving. How do you train your body to get to that point where you can run 30, 40, 50, 100 miles continuously? Like, how does someone even train to get to that point?
I think everything relates to outside life, not thinking about it too much. I think the number one thing if someone wants to get into this sort of sport is just patience, understanding that it's going to take time to develop that level of endurance to do these distances, but also patience within your training. I think everyone is capable to run 100 miles at any point, just based off of their pace, So I think if everyone just paces themselves according to their physical capability, then they can do it, and then just slowly get better and better, and then they can do it at a really impressive pace.
Sure. What have been some of the different connections you've made through the running community? Have you met some of these like top tier athletes or people that are making media appearances at the events? Like, what's been kind of your social or networking ability at some of these things?
Oh yeah, definitely. I talked to Goggins.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
You should have said that when we got here. What the heck?
Yeah. Talked to Goggins. Not only that,
who was carrying the boats? That's what I got to ask.
Yeah, who was carrying the boats?
I'm carrying
right?
the boats. Okay, see you later.
They don't know me, son.
Yeah, they don't know me, son.
I love the memes that are going on right now. It's amazing. But
or when he ties his feet up and he's like, I can't swim, and he just like basically drowns himself. Like, what are you doing? Somebody help that man. Like, he's going to drown himself.
Definitely impressive. But I've competed against a guy named Jeff Browning last year. He's an amazing runner. Very, very. I didn't know who he was at the time, and I should have, because he definitely humbled me that race as well. But he's amazing. He has a style of OFM, which is like using fat as metabolism, and so I started to use that, and it helped my training so much.
Is it like a dieting strategy or a okay
dieting and also hydration side of it? So
okay,
yeah,
cool. So with Goggins' interaction, was it like a get out of my way, and then you zoom past you? Like,
it was through social media.
Oh, okay. So you didn't meet him like at a race?
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, correct.
Because I was gonna say he seems like a very reclusive, kind of to himself type of person. Mm-hmm. And people, again, you said everyone says you're fake with your thumbtacks and your shoes. I feel like everyone wants to pick him apart, but I feel like he is literally just himself. Like, he doesn't care what people think, and it's kind of interesting. But I know because I read his autobiography, two of his books, and then just like when all that stuff was going on with like the lone survivor, he was running for awareness for the fallen troops, and I feel like ultra running wasn't like as big of a thing until some of these bigger people got into, because then people, the media follows these people. He's got like a Forrest Gump deal going on where he's like running across the country. Like, people kind of follow around that, so it helps add more attention to the sport. How did you first get introduced to ultra running, or did you just look for kind of a challenge that you could push yourself?
It was actually through Goggins. Okay. So it was sophomore year of high school. I watched a podcast, funny enough. It was, he basically explained how he ran 200-mile races, and I thought that was just absurd, and it was fake. There's no way someone can actually run 200-mile races. So I set a goal out to actually do the Moab 240, 240-mile foot race in the mountains out in Utah. And here I am doing it this year and last year as well. So
sure.
Yeah.
When I was just in Zion a couple months ago hiking, and just even, I mean, granted it was a national park, mountains and stuff, but I'm like, this is crazy. If you were like running some of those mountains just go straight up. I mean, there'd be like level ground, and then you got an elevation of, I can't even imagine. I'm sure the course creators probably put that thing all through the mountains, so you have some up and down, up and down.
Oh yeah, it's all through the mesas, and then you hit 2 mountain peaks as well, the La Salle and then the Shea Mountain as well. And I also want to do, there's a couple of races of Zion Park as well, and I want to do a couple of those. So I saw that you did that, and I'm definitely about that as well. So
yeah, well, I'm terrified of heights, so all my 3 buddies aren't, and they're like, dude, let's do Angel's Landing, which is like the steepest, and at the very top there's just a chain and a 4,000-foot drop to your death, and that I'm like, no way, not doing it. And they're like, come on. I'm like, I will literally die. Like, you have to call my wife and explain to her how he's gone. Like, sorry, we made him go up to the top of this mountain and fall to his death. So
that's not worth that sacrifice.
No, there's no benefit, zero. Okay, there's like the view would look cool, and to be like, oh, I did this, but other than that, I'm like, the risk versus reward is not there.
Yeah.
Tell me.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I just had her climb her first mountain as well. We climbed the tallest mountain in Colorado, Mount Albert. Okay. Was it about a month or 2 ago? It's pretty gnarly. So
what was that like? Because the elevation there is wild, right?
Yeah, I went up to 14,500 feet. So definitely something. It didn't affect me because I'm just used to that, but it affected her a lot.
Sure. What was it like a super touristy hike, or was it one of those that when you got to the top, there weren't very many people there?
There was actually a decent amount of people there. It was we came across probably at least 100 people throughout the whole travel up and down. So
how long did it take you to do?
I think it took us 10 to 12 hours, roughly. Yeah.
Did you stop for snacks?
Yeah.
Water breaks?
Oh, yeah. We took our time. We just wanted to enjoy because it's beautiful.
Sure. Well, you get that high, I'm sure you're like close to the clouds. Were you above the clouds or no?
Oh, yeah.
You were?
100%. Yeah. 100%.
That's got to be kind of creepy. Like, you can just sit down and look over like the sunset while above the clouds, feel like you're a bird or something.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, because I know my wife and I got into hiking a couple years ago. We went to Phoenix for Camelback Mountain. So we were there for a wedding, and then we're like, let's go hiking. So we picked like the hardest mountain. And I'm talking to my aunt who lives there. Mind you, it's always like 110 degrees in Phoenix, Arizona. And she's like, which mountain are you hiking? I'm like, oh, we're doing Camelback. And she kind of looked at me and looked at her husband. She's like, you know, people die on that mountain every year, right? I'm like, seriously? We had no clue we were going the next day. I'm like, how many times you've hiked? We're like, well, like once or twice. We're like, okay. But then we did it, and it was very difficult, but very rewarding too when you get up there. Luckily, the day we went, it was like 85, not 110. But we went to Greece for our honeymoon, and we hiked the Samaria Gorge, which is the island of Crete in the Mediterranean Sea. It's the biggest island in the Mediterranean. Basically, you take a bus to the very top of the mountain, and then you hike down the gorge. And the gorge is like, you zigzag all the way down, and then there's a river that cuts through the whole thing. So you hike around the river, and it goes up and over, and it's like fresh mountain water. So you can take your canteen and literally dip it in the river and drink it, and it's like ice cold, the cleanest water you could drink type stuff. And then you get to the very end, and it comes out in the Aegean Sea, and there's no roads. So you have to like wait for a ferry boat to come pick you up. And if you miss the boat, you have to just like sleep on the beach by yourself because there's no roads to get home. It was pretty wild, but that was like a 9-hour hike. And my wife and I really enjoyed it because it was like long, but the views are amazing. It looked like Yellowstone National Park because I think like we like that stuff where it's like there's views, there's history, there's kind of a fun piece to it. It sounds like you're just hitting the trail like with your head down. That sounds miserable.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of crazy. Because what's on your like race list coming up? Like you said Moab before. Are you doing Moab again this year?
Yeah. Okay. So in 1 month, October 13th, I have the Moab 240. And then 2 days later, I have another 100-mile race. It's out in Iowa. It has about 14,000 feet of climbing throughout the 100 miles, which is definitely intense. And then another month later, I have another 100-mile race out in Jesser Park. So,
okay. Nice. Yeah. That's like 10 minutes from where we're at right now, which is cool. That's really cool. Because I'm just curious, like when you're doing these 100-mile races, like what are your split times for your miles? Because like if I were to do this, it'd take me 20 minutes to run a mile. It's like, I'll take like 6 days to get it done. Like, are you going at a pretty good click, or what's your like lap times when you're doing those?
So with this last race that I was in, me and this guy named Jim, he was running the 100K. I was doing the 100-miler. For the first 12 miles, we were running 7-minute paces and also 7:30 uphills. So it was definitely really, really quick. And
that's crazy.
It was tough because it was all gravel, and it definitely affected my lungs, which was a very, very hard point within the race. So,
well, and if you're behind somebody that churns up a lot of stuff, then you're eating gravel the whole time. I'm sure it's kind of a
and there's also cars driving by.
Like, can you slow down? I'm trying to breathe here. Like, I'm getting asthma from just being out here. Because I think that's the other part too, is like keeping the pace. Because I always say like you break the wall when you're running, like you starts hurting, and then you just keep running, and then the hurt kind of slows down a little bit. Because I even had that because I go to the gym, but I also I do CrossFit. So I was doing this the other day. It was a 3-mile race, not a 100-mile race. But for me, I don't run a lot of distance stuff, and it was like. Once I got through that first like mile, then you just kind of get in a rhythm, and you just make sure you keep your legs going at the right speed to kind of keep the pace. Well, if you have a running watch, you can pace yourself or whatever. But I think that's a lot of people's thing is they just like think too much, or they're so worried about the pain that they're looking for the first way out. It's like what's Andy Frisella always say, the little bitch voice in your head. He's always like, it's always it's chirping like, hey, like you could stop up here. Oh, there's a turn. No one's going to see you. Like slow down. How do you silence your bitch voice from making you stop on these crazy long runs? Like, how do you mentally prepare for some of those things?
Very, very good question. So a lot of times if I have a moment where I'm just like self-doubt or just consistently just talking negative on myself, I make myself do extra in training. So if let's say I'm out for a 10-mile run and mile 8, I'm complaining and I just don't want to do what I set out to do and I trained for, then I'm like, okay, not time to run 12 miles or 15 miles. So just and then it gets to the point where that voice starts to, creep down a little bit because it doesn't want us to do more. So, yeah. Sure.
It's like I had a football coach like that if we had conditioning, and if guys were complaining and bitching, they'd just keep upping it. Like, again, like that's a physical embodiment of that, but it's doing that a lot. Because I know a lot of people really struggle with that. In any part of life, it's like things are getting hard. I want to give up. I want to quit. Throw in the towel, however you want to say it. What advice do you have to people that are? It would seem like a minute problem or a smallish problem when they're faced with those things, what advice do you have for people to confront that bitch voice of their own and be like, take command of their life in those things that it's easy to just quit on?
Okay. So I would definitely say I learned from a guy named Charles Ventosa last year in the Moab 240. I was at that point, I was complaining. Him and I were running.
What distance were you at when this hit you?
It was approximately mile 50, 53, around there.
And it was 100 mile or
240.
Oh my gosh.
240.
Okay. So you weren't even halfway yet,
Yes.
which I could see why you're like, I'm not even halfway
And
yet.
it just hit nighttime and it started getting dark, and that's where the dark thoughts happen. And so he just told me, be grateful for the pain that you're feeling, because no one is feeling the pain that you are feeling. So whatever God put on you, it's an experience to get better. So if you're having that pain, it's a good thing, because that means the pain's not going to happen in the future. You're already experiencing it, you know? So when you're fresh out, let's say mile 1, you're not feeling any pain. It's just waiting and anticipating for that pain. But once you're experiencing that pain, now you can just live in it throughout the rest of the race. So just be grateful for it and just try to push through one step at a time, because that's all you can do. If you're thinking 2, 10, 50 miles at a time, it's just all you can do is one step at a time. And that's a very, very important thing that helps me within just keep on going and, you know.
Sure. Well, it's interesting hearing that perspective, because I know I've listened to some interviews with like some top tier, like top 10 CrossFitters in the world, like the people that make it to the very end of the games and try to compete for medals and stuff like that. And I think it was Matt Frazier, correct? I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but he always talks about like he get these crazy scores on his timed events where he's like completely gassed out, and they're like, dude, how are you still like ripping these like heavy clean snatches and then getting on a bike or a rower and just like killing yourself? And he's like, the way I look at it is like, I'll do one rep and then I reward myself with a breath. So he's like, if I'm about to like feel like I'm going to pass out, he's like, just do one more heavy snatch and then take a deep breath, and then that's your reward. And then you just go back and do it again. He's like trained his mind to just only focus on like an inch at a time. It's like you're saying this mega goal of like 240 miles. Like, do you focus on the big goal, or how do you approach those things so you can stay focused to kind of do you hit milestones, markers? Like, how do you get so you can actually finish the whole thing?
Literally take it one step at a time. That's all you can do. I mean, early on, it's easy to think about miles at a time because you're not feeling that pain. But once you get to that point where you're just down mentally and you just want to give up, like over and over and over again, all you can do is just tell yourself, just keep going, that you should be grateful that you're even in Utah right now. You don't have to work. All you have to do is just continue running. And running is the easy part, you know. It stresses my crew out a lot. You know, last time I had my family out there, and honestly, it probably played into more of a factor for them because I didn't meet certain cutoff times, and it stressed them out. So I just told myself, hey, what I'm doing right now is stressing out other people, so I just gotta keep it going. It's not only about myself; it's about other people around me, you know. And so as I keep getting older, I start to realize that I'm not just one person. It takes so many people to build a nice, you know, support system for a good goal to, you know, occur. And so all I can do is just take it one step at a time and just do my job. So
sure. Well, you bring up a good point too, because people would probably hear this and think, oh, you just get on a plane, fly out there, run the race. They got medical staff. You pass, somebody to see you on the road. Like, you know, talk to me about the support system and like how that plays a role. Because what do they do for you while you're out running the race? What are the people that you bring with your crew? How do they help make sure you can finish and potentially place in a race?
she's the perfect person to talk about it. She came with me last Saturday for the race that I did. She set out everything. Once I hit the aid station, everything was already set out. I already have my tub so I can dump my feed in. I have my electrolytes, my nutrition, my hiking poles, whatever I have. That way I can just get everything packed up, eat, and just head on, keep going, And that's a very stressful thing because she has to worry about, arriving at the aid station at the right time, making sure she has enough gas, making sure she has the right food, everything's filled up, and it's very, very stressful. So there's a lot that goes on between just crewing and helping versus just me running. That's all I got to do. So
Sure.
I've never crewed before, so I don't know what it's like. That's why I appreciate and I'm so grateful for the people that help me.
Sure. Well, it sounds like it takes a village because, not only just your personal crew, but also medical staff, people making sure you're staying on the trail and not running like the wrong way. I just saw a video the other day of like a lady was finishing a race in France on a bike. She was the number one person following the police escort, and there's a huge finish sign, and all the people in the police escort just turned off to the side so then he'd get out of the way, and she followed him down the side street and lost the race. Like she was the first person and she like just went zoop.
Oh,
And everyone's like, wait, and it was like, the crowd was like, go that. It was like Forrest Gump where they're like, turn that way. It was like that. So I can only imagine like the feeling of just being like, and I think she ended up getting like 10th because like all these people were riding her tail and then she figured it out and then turned around. But you're probably so tired and your head is down and you're just like, I just got to keep going. Like you don't even realize where you're at. How do you stay on pace with your, like knowing where you're at? Do you have like a watch with the set thing in there so you don't get lost? There are people, markers, like how do they keep you in line?
That's a very good question. So before I even got this watch, I used to just be paranoid. I would be on my phone 24/7 just trying to navigate through. And then after I got my watch, definitely helps me out because if I'm, let's say I miss a marker, then it beeps on my watch and I'm like, hey, go left, whatever. And then as I'm approaching, let's say a turn or whatnot, then it tells me, hey, you're approaching a turn. So it alerts me so I don't ever lose track of where I'm going. So that is a huge thing. But before it was very, very stressful. I would have like pieces of paper that I'm following or just, my phone, like I mentioned before with navigation. But now that I have a watch that has the course outline that I can just follow, it's perfect.
Yeah, technology's wild. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the placing. So, I mean, it sounds like you're young in the process of it. You've only done a couple races compared to people that have done it for like a decade. Mm-hmm. Where are you placing and what's kind of the goal for like improving placement and trying to get better as you go on?
Right now I'm just placing finishing basically. So whether it's 100Ks or like I said, the 100-mile races that I got going on, just finishing. My goal, so every time I go into a race, I try to just put crazy goal out there and just try to attain it. This last goal that I had was course record. What definitely was going after that. My goal always is to finish first, not to just complete it. But obviously there's so many things that go on throughout the course of 20 plus hours of running that can definitely affect and alter that. So
sure. Because I know like in terms of like the last race you did, you said you had some things that came up like the gravel and some other things that could kind of slow you down. Mm-hmm. Do you know who like the first place finisher was, what their time was, and then did you say you finished the race?
Yeah.
Do you know like what was the difference between those?
So I don't know what the quickest for the 100K was, but it was I believe she was the first ever female to win the race, which I'm super proud of her for. And then I believe she might have got it by like 6 or 5 hours from me. So
okay,
yeah.
So it takes more than 24 hours to finish a race like that, right?
No.
People finish it in less than a day?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's wild. If I ever need a package delivered, be like, here, it's 200 miles away. See you next day of delivery.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty wild. Because I'm just surprised that, like, I mean, I remember reading in my history class, like oh, God, now I'm going to forget this, but the guy that ran the news back that they had won the war was yelling Nike. I think it was in Greece that he got back to does that sound right? That sounds right? Okay, it sounds right. But when he ran, it was marathon. He ran the first marathon, the 21 miles, because they had a message. They like, take this back to the city and tell them that we won the war. So he just ran as fast as he could, got there, and was like yelling Nike, which meant they won, and they passed out and died in the middle of the courtyard. And they're like, cool. Like people are like, oh, and they told the king or whatever. But it's like, to go from that, where someone would just literally drop dead from running 20 miles to people put another 0 on the back of that and doing 200 miles. Like, I just think it's insane that that's where the human condition's gotten to, that people do this for fun. They're not like
and I
being whipped or yelled at, or they're not being chased by bears to do this.
They're choosing to do it.
Yeah, it's like a voluntary thing. Like you're choosing to put yourself through this kind of pain.
Yeah. I always think about like this. You know a guy named Cameron Haynes, right?
Sounds familiar.
So he's a bow hunter, and I always put it in perspective, like back in the day when they were hunting out for food, they used to chase these animals for hundreds of miles. And I always think if they had to do that to survive, I might as well just do it voluntarily. So It's just a choice that I make, and a lot of people aren't willing to make that choice, but everyone has their own path in life. So,
well, and I think it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of people that, I mean, I'm 28, and there's a lot of people in my age that are like, you're starting to get the fatigue of not being 20 in your young 20s anymore, and things kind of catch up with you. And I'm sure I'll be biting my tongue in 10 years. I'm like, really? You thought that was painful? But there's a lot of people that I feel like if you put yourself through hardship or pain, it makes the rest of your life easier. Because I'd be curious to get your opinion on this, because a lot of people anymore just complain about everything. Like I've tried to get a lot of those people out of my life, but sometimes it's hard with like family or close friends. You don't quite want to just like kick them out of your life because they're super negative. But what advice do you give to people that are just super negative about things that maybe pursuing, maybe not ultra running, but like doing hard things can make you a better person or a more appreciative person or somebody that can get through some of those things. What would be some of your advice to somebody that is going through something like that?
I would say a lot of times it's hard because some people will only change when they want to change, and a lot of times I would say there's only two ways of life. You either have complaining or non-complaining, and you can either live in either one of them. You can't have both, and so if you're just complaining about circumstances around you, you can always just understand that people have it far worse than you, and that should, in hindsight, get you to stop complaining, but if it doesn't, then I don't have any advice for that. Sometimes people just want to complain and, think that their life is hard when in reality it's a lot easier. I think a lot of people, including myself, are very, very privileged just to even be alive. That's a blessing in itself. So you should just try your best to just take it one step at a time, one day at a time, one problem at a time, and just continue to, push on through life and not like really stress about the little things, because I think something that's been helping me recently is just being appreciative and grateful of the people around me, myself, my well-being and my mental state when it comes to just happiness, running and acting and all these other things. So it's helping me not complain,
Right. Well, I think it's interesting.
It's grounding me.
Yeah, yeah. And one of my clients, she was at the Boston Marathon when the bombings happened, and she's been like a huge marathon runner, motivational speaker, all these things. And she was saying she went to a doctor and they were basically told her like she was experiencing depression. And the doctor's like, I don't think you're depressed. And she's like, why? And he's like, you're a marathon runner. Like he's like, in 40 years of practicing medicine, I've never met a depressed marathon runner. Cause like any stress in your life, you're running all the time. You just like get that runner's high. You just like get all those endorphins and you're happy all the time. So he's like, it has to be something else. So it was kind of interesting, like hearing that side of it, because it's true in a sense where not that people that run don't have problems, but it's that regularly exercising to that degree, you're just building self-confidence, you're burning through all the stress, like you're not sitting and stewing in your problems, you're kind of like finding a good way to get out of that energy. I
think you need that within your life, that physical activity, whether it's working out, doing yoga, stretching, running, whatever the case may be, because I think that just evens out like the mental side of everything. Once you get, like as you said, release that endorphins, it can definitely help you, when you're just so stressed mentally. Let's say you're stressed about your job, life happening, whatever the case may be. When you have that physical side of things, you're not thinking about all the problems in your life, and it sort of fixes it in a sense, because then after you have that hard activity that you're doing, then you can attack that problem in your life with a logical mindset rather than emotional,
Sure. So have you done any other like mindset challenges or hard things outside of running, or have you dipped into some of those things because like, well, if I can run a 200-mile race, let's try this thing. Like, have you tried anything else?
I did after I graduated, because I graduated early, so 2020, and I did a thing where I would have 1 hour of sleep a day, and I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and hit 3 workouts in the same day, go to bed by 7 o'clock, and then just wake up, just continue to do it over and over and over. And then I got to a point where I was, let's say I would work out at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would get an hour of sleep, and then wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and just continue my day. And then wait till the second or 2 a.m., 3 a.m. to get the hour of sleep, and then just continue going.
So how long did you do that before your body gave
month.
out? Seriously?
Yeah, a month. And to add a upside on it, I slept on the floor every single day.
Why?
Just because if I'm gonna put it's gonna be difficult to wake up when I'm in a bed. So if I'm on the floor, I'm going to want to wake up because it's not comfortable. So I'm just going to continue to just keep pushing myself through it and just suck it up. And over a period of time, you get used to it. It becomes your normal. So
Sure. So how long ago did you do that?
That was 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself from putting yourself through something like that?
I learned that I am not a strong person. All it takes is just the hour at a time, the workout at a time, and just making sure I can eat enough and understanding that like we are more than what we can do just by simple activities, just not sleeping on the floor, sleep deprivation, all these little things. And it can definitely be hard, but there are monks out there, like you mentioned before, that live that lifestyle. And so might as well just try to do as best as I can.
Sure. Well, and I know earlier in the week I interviewed Aaron Anderson. He's the owner of Fresh Fit Meals, and they have a location in Ankeny and in Urbandale as well. Mm-hmm. And he's on like day 50 of 75 hard, which are you familiar with that one as well? And it was interesting because it's like very simple things that most people could do, which is, drink a gallon of water, read 10 pages of a nonfiction book, stay on a meal plan, don't eat a cheat meal, don't drink, and then 2 workouts, 1 outdoors, no matter what. And so many people would think that's like so hard, but it's just the mental fortitude. Because as I mentioned earlier, doing hard things makes you better at life. Like you can, endure problems with a relationship or marriage. You can go through hardships at work, or you getting fired or laid off, or starting a business or whatever. If a family member has, God forbid, a disease or sickness and they're in the hospital, like having subjected yourself to pain voluntarily, you are now more callous to handle those things. I always think that's the thing most people don't think about is like, if you voluntarily put yourself through hell, you're going to be able to succeed at almost anything you want because it transfers to other parts of your life.
That's absolutely true. I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I think too, just looking forward in your races and stuff, what are some upcoming events? You mentioned Moab here in a little bit. Is there any like kind of pin on the wall type of things? Like I'd love to get to this state or finishing this time, or what's like your bigger picture goal in the next 3 to 5 years?
So my goal with Moab 240 is I want to break course record. And then also I want to do for the 100-mile race that I'm doing, I want to qualify for UTMB, which is the races in France that you were just mentioning before.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I would love to do that as well and just continue to just run races, do as many 200s as I can, but also get better at 100s because I think I would be better at 200s than 100s, but just continue to do that, but also continue to do acting as well. It's hard to balance the two because they're both very time consuming. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and tell me a little bit about like the goals of the acting. You mentioned moving to Atlanta potentially, or wanting to do a TV show. Is there something in the acting realm that you're really drawn to? Is it like drama, the action movies? Like what's the thing that you would love to do if you could snap your fingers and land a role in an ideal situation?
Do you know who Cillian Murphy is? Any sort of role that he does.
Oppenheimer and Peaky Blinders.
Yeah. I love serious roles, but also a lot of people know me as I have a comedic side, so I can definitely tap into that as well. But I'm very into that serious sort of level of acting. Not like there's that corny level of acting, I guess, but I love that serious like realism.
Sure. Like more like dramas, like that type of thing. Okay, I love that. Yeah, it's interesting too because being in the film industry, I have friends of mine that have shot movies and people that live in LA, producers and stuff. So I always like for people to like communicate that because you never know. One of my friends might be listening to this. They might need a serious role actor. So do you go through an agency or do you just privately reach out to people and try and get found?
Yeah, there was this one agency in Atlanta that I was submitting to, but I'm not signed with them. But I'm just solo dolo right now. So.
Sure. That's dope. Because I know like here locally, Peak is like the main people here in town, but a lot of times they'll just hire for regional commercials because when I worked at my studio, like that's their bread and butter is like, here's our list of 100 actors or actresses and pick from those people. But I think if you know the types of roles, I mean, you talk to these, I've watched so many interviews with actors that are like A-level, A-class actors. Their success story is just so random. It's like, I was waitressing and then this producer was there and then they mentioned this and now I'm Chris Pratt. It's like, I was just watching his interview the other day and like, it's a 15-minute long interview and I left out a lot of details, but that's basically it. He's like, he was a waiter and got a role that way. Like Harrison Ford got Star Wars by like building George Lucas's desk. He was a carpenter. It's like, there's all these insane stories of how people get found or get into that. And it's just like, I always think it's funny when A-list actors try to like gatekeep because I'm like, there was no secret sauce. You just got really lucky and you happen to be very talented. So when opportunity presented itself, you could capitalize. But I feel like it's a lot of that anymore is just the online stuff. But do you feel like running your races age your acting career, or do you feel like it helps set you apart or could get you a role in something like that where it's like a role that would need somebody that's able to do that?
I think that would be very helpful because of the athletic side of it. I stay in shape, but also there's a lot of roles that not many people can do when it comes to, well, there's not many running movies, but also I do other sports as well, like basketball, for example, and I'm very, very good at that. So that can also help into that but when it comes to running, there's a lot of like debate online whether it ages you or not, but I would say it makes me as young as possible, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So, regardless of how strenuous the activity may be.
Sure.
So.
No, I love that. And I think it's interesting just hearing your story and I mean, like we said, we hear the Goggins of the world, but it's like everyday people do this voluntarily. So I think that's the interesting part is that people subject themselves to this and can kind of do that as well. What would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned from doing ultra running and the extreme pain you've put yourself through? What's the biggest lesson you think you've learned about yourself?
That's a very tough question. I have just so many that are running through my mind. I would say the number one thing would probably be understanding that we're all human. Like understanding that I am human too. That a lot of times I should take my health into consideration as well. I love pushing past that limit, but understanding that we're all human and that there's obviously no one better or worse than us. Obviously, it's subjective the way you can look at it, and it's circumstantial as well. But for the most part, we all have the same capability. And so when it comes to like racing, I'm like, we all have the same capability. I can win first place. He can win first place. We just have to compete it out, So that's just that grounds me, like I said earlier, within the mindset within running. It's just we are all human, So
No, I love that, and I know it's asking the deep conversation ones. I know that's a hard one to answer, but it really is, because I think the number one thing, I think when people hear this interview, they're going to think, why does he do that? And also, like, what benefit could you possibly have? But I think hearing your story is interesting because you've subjected yourself voluntarily, but the collateral benefits seems like it's really helped you ground yourself, understand, challenge yourself, but also callous your mind and prepare yourself for other things. Because how old are you?
I just turned 21.
Okay, well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's like that. At your age too, it's like there's 50-year-olds that haven't done half the hard stuff you've done, even at your own age. So I can't imagine what the future has to hold for you as well. So I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. And to answer your question with why I do it as well, I would say it's just because no one else does it. Like no one else my age that I know of do it. No one in the world runs with Thumbtacks. And so that makes me do the whys of I can do it because no one else can do it. Yeah, we are all human, but you're choosing not to, So
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's interesting too. Tell me a little bit about like your plan for your platform. At say you kind of have a video pop off or a photo, or people start following your story. What would you like to hopefully like to do with your platform to kind of use running as a tool to help people in some way?
I definitely want to inspire comedy within it. I want people to just have a kick out laugh, because not everyone's going to relate to what I do. So if you can relate to the comedy side of it, then I can get that sort of audience, I guess. But also I really want to inspire and motivate people to just try their best in life. As long as you try, that's all you can do. There's no guarantees, but just continue to try and push through it and, just see what you're about.
Sure. Love it, man. Well, Faruk, thanks so much for being on the show. Where can people find more if they want to check you out online or follow along with your racing escapades? Where can they find you?
At Thumbtack Runner on Instagram. That's the only social media that I use. And then Faruk Garibovic on Ultra Sign Up. So keep in tune with that.
Right. Are you on Strava?
No.
Okay.
I was too competitive. So.
Okay. I'm like, there's all these, I don't know anything. I just know Strava's the running social media. It's like, okay, all these people with their running stuff. So again, thanks for coming on the show, man. I think there's a lot of value people can pull from your mindset and apply it to their daily life. Like trying to do something hard every day is such a good practice to be in. I really appreciate you coming on the show. So
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Seriously.
Awesome. Well, there you guys have it. Another episode of the Rhymes with Odd podcast. If you're making it to this far in the show, make sure to give us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes. Makes a big difference. And check out Faruk on social media. My name is Ryan Snaadt. It rhymes with Odd, and we'll check you in the next episode.